I stared at the termination letter in the hospital cafeteria, my coffee growing cold. Upstairs in the cardiac ICU, my 8-year-old son, Michael, was recovering from his third open heart surgery, while downtown at Meridian Healthcare Systems, my office was probably already being packed up by HR. In light of ongoing organizational restructuring and current market conditions, the corporate doublespeak couldn't hide the brutality of the timing. I'm James Morrison, Senior Forensic Accountant at Meridian Healthcare. Or rather, I was until 2 hours ago, when CFO William Barrett decided that my son's medical crisis was the perfect cover for eliminating me. My phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Santos. Michael's vitals stabilizing. Surgery successful. Come up when you can. I closed my eyes, letting relief wash over me. My son would live. And because he would live, I could now focus on making William Barrett wish he'd chosen a different day to fire me. The thing about forensic accountants, we're trained to notice patterns, to archive everything, to maintain backups of our backups. For the past 9 months, I've been quietly documenting irregularities in Meridian's Medicare billing system. Small discrepancies at first, the kind most people would miss. But they added up. Oh, how they added up. I pulled out my personal laptop, connected to the hospital's Wi-Fi through a secure VPN, and accessed my private cloud storage. 9 months of evidence, all meticulously cataloged. Altered patient records, inflated billing codes, phantom procedures charged to Medicare. A fraud scheme worth millions, possibly billions. I'd been getting close to proving who was behind it. Too close, apparently. Barrett must have realized I was onto him. My son's surgery provided the perfect opportunity. Who would question laying off an employee distracted by a family medical crisis? Mr. Morrison. A nurse appeared at my table. Michael's asking for you. I packed up my laptop and headed to the ICU. Michael lay amid a tangle of tubes and monitors, his small chest wrapped in bandages, but his eyes were open. He managed a weak smile when he saw me. Hey, buddy, I said, taking his hand. You did great. Did you get the bad guys at work yet, Dad? He whispered. It was our private joke. He thought my job was like being a police detective, but with numbers instead of criminals. Not yet, I replied, squeezing his hand gently. But I will. I promise. After Michael fell asleep, I sat in the ICU room with my laptop, beginning the work that would bring down William Barrett and everyone involved in his scheme. First step, organizing the evidence for maximum impact. The fraud went back at least 3 years. Barrett had implemented a new electronic billing system then, supposedly to streamline operations. What it actually did was allow systematic manipulation of diagnosis codes, procedure records, and Medicare claims. I'd first noticed something wrong during a routine audit last year, a pattern of billing codes that didn't match patient records. When I dug deeper, I found more discrepancies. Services billed but never performed, procedures coded at higher complexity levels than actually delivered, patient stays extended on paper long after discharge. Barrett had been clever about hiding it. The fraudulent charges were spread across multiple facilities, departments, and patient categories. No single case was large enough to raise red flags, but collectively, they represented massive Medicare fraud. I'd started keeping separate records, documenting everything on my personal devices, storing backups in encrypted cloud storage that only I could access. Standard procedure for a forensic accountant investigating fraud. Never keep evidence where the suspects can reach it. My phone buzzed again. A text from Sandra in my department. Barrett's cleaning house. 3 more layoffs this morning. All from finance/accounting. Stay safe. Of course he was cleaning house. Anyone who might have noticed the pattern, anyone who had access to the billing records, they had to go. And he was using my son's surgery as cover for the first wave of layoffs, counting on everyone being too sympathetic about my situation to question the timing. I began composing emails, one to the FBI's healthcare fraud unit, one to the Department of Health and Human Services, one to the Medicare Fraud Strike Force. Each contained selected evidence from my files, enough to launch an investigation, but not enough to show my full hand. Mr. Morrison. Dr. Santos had returned. We need to discuss Michael's post-operative care plan. I closed my laptop and focused on what mattered most, my son's recovery. The emails could wait a few hours. Barrett wouldn't expect me to act immediately anyway. He thought I'd be too devastated by the layoff, too focused on Michael's condition, to cause trouble. That was his first mistake. His second mistake was not understanding that a father with a critically ill child has nothing left to lose, and therefore nothing left to fear. The post-op consultation with Dr. Santos was encouraging. Michael's surgery had gone better than expected. He would need several weeks of recovery and rehabilitation, but the prognosis was good. The doctor mentioned that the hospital's charitable foundation might be able to help with expenses now that I was unemployed. Don't worry about the expenses, I said quietly. They'll be covered. One way or another, William Barrett would pay for my son's care. Back in the ICU room, I resumed my work. The evidence was overwhelming once you knew where to look. Barrett had created a complex web of fraudulent billing practices, but like most white-collar criminals, he'd gotten sloppy as he got greedy. I found his digital fingerprints all over the scheme, system access logs, approval codes, protocol modifications that only someone at his level could authorize. He'd thought he was covering his tracks, but he didn't understand the depth of forensic accounting techniques. My phone buzzed continuously as word of the layoffs spread through the company. More texts from colleagues, some angry, some sympathetic, some afraid they were next. I responded selectively, identifying potential allies who might be willing to provide additional evidence once the investigation began. By evening, my initial reports were ready to send. I triple-checked everything, making sure the evidence was clear enough for investigators to follow, but complex enough that they'd need my help to unravel it all. Then I hit send on all 3 emails simultaneously. Michael stirred in his sleep, and I set aside the laptop to hold his hand. The bad guys won't win this time, buddy, I whispered. Dad's going to make sure of that. My phone buzzed again, a call from Barrett himself. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. James, I hope you understand this wasn't personal. Just business decisions that had to be made. Your severance package will be generous, assuming we can count on your discretion. I smiled grimly. Barrett was already trying to buy my silence, which meant he was worried. He should be. The emails I'd sent would trigger automatic investigations. Once federal agents started pulling threads, the whole scheme would unravel. But that was just the beginning. I had more evidence, more damning proof of Barrett's crimes. I'd release it strategically, piece by piece, maximizing the damage while ensuring my role as a key witness couldn't be undermined. A nurse came in to check Michael's vitals. He's doing really well, she said encouragingly. Strong heart rate, good oxygen levels. He's a fighter. Yes, he is, I agreed. Like father, like son. I spent the night in the ICU room, alternating between watching Michael's monitors and refining my evidence files. By morning, I had confirmation receipts from all 3 agencies. Investigations would be launching within days. Barrett called twice more, then sent an email offering to discuss transition arrangements. I archived it without replying. Let him sweat. Let him wonder what I knew, what I could prove, what I planned to do with the evidence. The next few days passed in a blur of hospital routines and investigator contacts. Michael grew stronger each day, moving from ICU to a regular room. I used the hospital as my base of operations, coordinating with federal agents while supervising my son's recovery. 1 week after my termination, the first phase of my counterattack took effect. FBI agents arrived at Meridian Healthcare headquarters with subpoenas for billing records. Barrett's assistant called me in a panic. James, What's happening? There are federal agents everywhere. Interesting, I replied calmly. Maybe someone should audit those Medicare billing codes more carefully. I could almost hear her connecting the dots. Oh God, you knew? All this time? Give Mr. Barrett my regards, I said, ending the call. Michael was doing physical therapy when Barrett made one last attempt to contact me. Whatever you think you know, we can work something out. Name your price. I showed the text to Michael. See that, buddy? The bad guy is getting nervous. Michael grinned weakly. Did you get him with numbers, Dad? Yes, I did. And he's about to learn a very expensive lesson about karma. 2 weeks after my termination, I sat in a downtown federal building with FBI Special Agent Diana Martinez, walking her through the intricacies of Barrett's Medicare fraud scheme. Michael was recovering well at home under my mother's care, which allowed me to focus on bringing down the man who tried to destroy us. The pattern is brilliant in its simplicity, I explained, displaying spreadsheets on my laptop. Barrett modified the billing system to automatically upcode certain procedures. A level 3 visit becomes level 4. Outpatient procedures get coded as inpatient. Routine tests are billed as complex diagnostics. And nobody noticed. Martinez asked, studying the data. People notice pieces, but never the whole picture. Barrett compartmentalized everything, kept different departments isolated. Plus, he was strategic about who be laid off or transferred when they got too curious. The investigation was moving faster than expected. My documentation had given federal agents a roadmap to follow, and they were finding even more fraud than I'd initially uncovered. The total was approaching $156 million in fraudulent Medicare claims over 3 years. My phone buzzed. A text from Sandra. Barrett hasn't been to the office in 3 days. Board called emergency meeting tomorrow. I showed the message to Martinez. He's planning to run. The evidence trail leads to accounts in the Cayman Islands. He'll try to disappear before you can arrest him. Not going to happen, Martinez assured me. We've got eyes on him 24/7. But we need to move fast to prevent evidence destruction. I nodded, pulling up another set of files. These are the original billing records, before his system modified them. I created a hidden backup when I first noticed the discrepancies. Barrett doesn't know these copies exist. Martinez leaned forward. This is exactly what we need for the arrest warrant. How soon can you prepare a formal statement? Give me 2 hours. I need to check on Michael first. I called home, where my mother reported that Michael was doing his physical therapy exercises and asking when I'd be home to play chess. The normalcy of it almost brought tears to my eyes. 2 weeks ago, I wasn't sure if he'd survived the surgery. Now he was recovering, and Barrett was the one fighting for survival. Back at my temporary workspace in the federal building, I carefully composed my official statement. Every detail had to be perfect, every accusation backed by irrefutable evidence. Barrett would have expensive lawyers trying to discredit me, painting me as a disgruntled ex-employee seeking revenge. They weren't entirely wrong about the revenge part. But revenge served cold comes with detailed documentation. My phone buzzed again, this time from Barrett's personal number. Last chance to be reasonable. Think about your son's future medical expenses. I forwarded the message to Martinez. Add witness intimidation to the charges. She smiled grimly. With pleasure. We're moving on him tomorrow morning. Want to watch? I shook my head. I need to be home with Michael. Just send me a photo of his face when you show him the evidence files. That evening, I played chess with Michael in his recovery room, now set up in our living room. He was getting stronger every day, his color returning, his spirit unbroken. Dad, he said, moving his knight, Tommy at school said his dad saw on the news that your old boss is in trouble. Did you catch him being bad with numbers? I captured his knight with my bishop. Something like that, buddy. Remember how I taught you that in chess, sometimes you have to let your opponent think they're winning before you show them your real strategy? He nodded seriously. Like when I let you take my knight just now because your bishop isn't protecting your queen anymore. I looked at the board and laughed. He had indeed set a trap for me. Exactly like that. Check and mate in 3 moves, isn't it? 2 moves, he grinned. You taught me to always think 3 moves ahead. At 6:00 a.m. the next morning, FBI agents surrounded Barrett's luxury penthouse. By 6:30, he was in handcuffs, his face ashen as Martinez showed him the evidence files. By 7:00, the story was breaking on local news. Meridian Healthcare CFO arrested in massive Medicare fraud scheme. Federal agents uncover $156 million healthcare fraud. Top executive facing multiple fraud charges. My phone exploded with messages from former colleagues. Most expressed shock at Barrett's crimes, though a few admitted they'd suspected something wasn't right. Sandra texted, "Board meeting canceled. They're all lawyers now." Martinez called mid-morning. Barrett's singing like a canary. Implicated 3 other executives and 2 board members. Want to guess who he tried to blame first? The recently fired forensic accountant with a sick kid. Bingo. His lawyer actually tried to claim you fabricated everything because you were bitter about being laid off. Then we showed them the timestamp proof that you documented everything months before your termination. I was helping Michael with his breathing exercises when Meridian's CEO called. I let it go to voicemail, then listened later. "James, this is Paul Davidson. There's no excuse for what happened. The board has authorized me to offer you full reinstatement, back pay, and a significant compensation package. Please call me." I played the message for my mother. She snorted in disgust. "I hope you're not considering it." "Actually, I am," I said quietly. "But not for the reasons they think." The next day, while Michael had his physical therapy session, I met with Davidson in his office. The CEO looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Name your price," he said without preamble. "Whatever you want. We need you back to help clean up this mess." I placed a folder on his desk. "My terms are non-negotiable. Full reinstatement as Chief Compliance Officer, reporting directly to the board. Complete audit authority over all financial systems. My department picks its own staff and sets its own protocols." Davidson nodded quickly. "Done. Anything else?" "Yes. The company establishes a foundation for families dealing with pediatric cardiac issues. Fully funded, independently managed. And my son's medical care is covered for life. No questions asked." "Of course, absolutely." He reached for the folder. "Is that everything?" I held the folder down with one hand. "One more thing. Every executive who knew about Barrett's scheme but stayed quiet. They resign within 24 hours, or I take my evidence of their complicity to the FBI." Davidson paled. "That would gut half the management team." "Yes, it would. Sometimes healing requires surgery to remove the disease. You have until tomorrow morning to decide." I stood to leave, but Davidson called after me. "Why come back at all? Why not just walk away?" I turned back. "Because someone needs to protect other families from people like Barrett. And because my son asked me if I caught the bad guy. I want to make sure I can tell him I caught all of them." By evening, 4 executives had resigned. 2 more followed the next morning. Davidson kept his word about my appointment and authority. The board, desperate to avoid further scandal, approved everything without discussion. I spent the next week rebuilding the compliance department, rehiring good people Barrett had pushed out, implementing new oversight systems. But my favorite moment came when Michael was strong enough to visit my new office. "This is where you catch bad guys with numbers?" he asked, looking around the corner office with wide eyes. "This is Command Central," I confirmed. "Want to see how we do it?" He spent an hour at my desk, fascinated by the monitoring systems we'd installed. "It's like a superhero headquarters," he declared. "Sometimes the best superheroes just pay attention to details," I told him, "and never forget why they're fighting." Barrett's trial was scheduled for spring. The evidence was overwhelming, his confession detailed. He would spend decades in prison, his empire destroyed by the man he tried to silence. But my real victory wasn't Barrett's downfall. It was watching Michael grow stronger each day, knowing his future care was secured. It was building systems to protect other families from similar fraud. It was showing my son that justice sometimes comes through spreadsheets and audit logs rather than superhero capes. 6 months after Barrett's arrest, I sat in the courtroom watching him plead guilty to all charges. The once powerful CFO looked small in his orange jumpsuit, his arrogance replaced by defeat as the judge read out the terms of his plea agreement. 25 years in federal prison, forfeiture of all assets, restitution of $156 million. Michael was having a good day at school, his first full day back since the surgery. The cardiac rehab had worked wonders, and his doctors were optimistic about his long-term prognosis. I'd promised to tell him all about the bad guy's punishment over chess that evening. The defendant knowingly and systematically defrauded Medicare. The judge continued, but my mind wandered to the changes at Meridian Healthcare over the past months. My new compliance department had uncovered 3 more attempted fraud schemes in other divisions, stopping them before they could fully develop. The culture was shifting. Employees now felt safe reporting concerns, knowing they'd be protected rather than terminated. The Pediatric Cardiac Care Foundation we'd established was already helping dozens of families. I'd insisted on naming it the Michael Morrison Foundation, not for my son, but for another Michael Morrison, a child who died 3 years ago because his family couldn't afford the surgery my son had received. Barrett's fraud had indirectly contributed to that death by inflating healthcare costs. My phone vibrated silently. A text from Sandra, now my deputy compliance officer. 4 more whistleblower reports this morning. Looks like the education programs are working. I smiled slightly. We'd implemented mandatory fraud awareness training for all employees, teaching them to recognize and report suspicious patterns. The message was clear. At Meridian Healthcare, integrity wasn't just a wall poster anymore. Barrett's lawyer was speaking now, trying to paint his client as a changed man who regretted his actions. I thought about the text message he'd sent me the day before my firing. Need to discuss some irregularities in your department's audit reports. He tried to intimidate me into silence, using my son's surgery as cover for eliminating a threat. The judge wasn't buying the lawyer's redemption story. "Mr. Barrett, you didn't just steal money. You betrayed public trust, endangered patient care, and attempted to destroy the life of an employee who discovered your crimes. This court sentences you to the maximum term agreed upon in your plea deal." After the sentencing, FBI agent Martinez met me outside the courthouse. "Quite a difference from the day we arrested him," she observed. "Remember how he tried to blame you for everything?" I nodded. Hard to blame someone who documents everything. Numbers don't lie, even when people do. "Speaking of documentation," she continued, "we're using your case as a training model for our financial crimes unit. Would you be willing to speak at our next seminar?" "Happy to. But first, I have a chess game to win, or more likely lose. Michael's getting better than me." At home that evening, Michael set up the chessboard while I recounted Barrett's sentencing. His understanding of the case had evolved over the months. He now grasped that his former bad guys with numbers analogy had been surprisingly accurate. 25 years is a long time, he said, moving his first pawn. Will he learn to be good in jail? That's up to him, I replied, countering his move. But what matters is he can't hurt any more families like he tried to hurt ours. Michael was quiet for several moves, then asked, "Dad, is that why you went back to work there? To stop other bad guys?" "Partly," I admitted. but also to show that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing. Sometimes you have to stand up, even when it's hard. Like going back to school was hard. He captured my night with a well-planned combination. But I did it anyway. Exactly like that. Check, by the way. He grinned. Checkmate in 3 moves. I studied the board. He was right. I was doomed. When did you get so good at this? While I was recovering. Mom said you were out catching bad guys with numbers, so I practiced chess to catch you with strategies. The next morning, I had a surprise visitor at my office, Paul Davidson, the CEO who'd helped implement the changes after Barrett's arrest. He was carrying a thick folder. The board approved everything, he said, placing the folder on my desk. Full funding for the foundation's expansion, new compliance systems for all facilities, and the whistleblower protection program you designed. I opened the folder, reviewing the documents. They approved the full amount. Every penny. After what Barrett did, nobody dares question compliance costs anymore. He paused. There's something else. The board wants to name the new compliance center after Michael. I looked up sharply. I don't want my son's name. Not your Michael, he interrupted. The other one. The one who died. I found out about that case during the investigation. His family is willing to let us honor his memory this way. I sat back, thinking about another Michael Morrison, about chances lost and lessons learned. Yes, I said finally, that would be appropriate. Later that day, I gave a presentation to new employees about our compliance programs. I told them about Barrett, about fraud patterns, about the importance of speaking up. But mostly, I told them about 2 Michael Morrisons, one who lived because people stood up for what was right, and one who died because people stayed silent too long. The numbers always tell a story, I concluded. Our job is to make sure it's a story of integrity, not fraud, of healing, not harm. That evening, as Michael and I played our nightly chess game, he asked me about the compliance center naming. So it's named after another Michael Morrison, like me. Yes, someone we help remember by doing better, by making sure other families don't suffer like his did. He moved his queen thoughtfully. That's good. It's like he's helping catch bad guys too, isn't it? Yes, I said softly, watching my son, healthy, strong, and wiser than his years. That's exactly what it's like. Checkmate, he announced. Want to play again? Always, I replied, resetting the board. Always think 3 moves ahead, right? He nodded seriously. And always remember why we're playing. Barrett would spend 25 years thinking about his crimes. I would spend those years building something better from the ashes of his fraud. Stronger compliance systems, better protections for families, a legacy of integrity named for a child who never got the chance my son had. Sometimes justice comes through unexpected channels. Sometimes the biggest victories start with one person noticing numbers that don't add up. And sometimes the best revenge isn't punishment, but transformation, turning someone's crimes into a catalyst for positive change. 1 year to the day after Barrett's sentencing, I stood at a podium outside Meridian Healthcare's new Michael Morrison Compliance Center. The building gleamed in the morning sun, its glass walls representing the transparency we'd built into every level of the organization. Michael sat in the front row with his mother and grandmother, wearing a suit that matched mine. At 10 years old, he'd become the unofficial mascot of our compliance department, his story inspiring a cultural shift that transformed the company. A year ago, I began my dedication speech. This company faced a choice. We could treat financial fraud as an isolated incident or recognize it as a symptom of a deeper problem. We chose the harder path, complete transformation. The audience included federal investigators, healthcare administrators, and most importantly, the Morrison family, the parents of the other Michael Morrison, whose memory we honored today. This center represents more than compliance, I continued. It represents our commitment to every family that trusts us with their care. Because healthcare fraud isn't just about money. It's about lives affected, trust betrayed, and sometimes lives lost. From my podium, I could see Barrett's case displayed in the center's lobby, a permanent reminder of what happens when profit matters more than people. His 25-year sentence had sparked industry-wide reforms, with other healthcare companies rushing to strengthen their compliance programs. The Michael Morrison Foundation had grown beyond our initial vision, now helping hundreds of families afford critical pediatric care. We'd established partnerships with major hospitals, ensuring no child would be denied treatment due to cost. Today, we don't just open a building, I said, nearing the end of my speech. We establish a legacy. A promise that integrity isn't negotiable, that every number represents a human life, and that doing the right thing matters more than doing the profitable thing. My son caught my eye and gave me a thumbs up. His last cardiac checkup had shown complete recovery, his heart strong and steady. Like father, like son, we'd both grown stronger through adversity. After the ceremony, Michael approached the other Michael's parents. "I'm sorry about your son," he said with quiet dignity. "Dad says he helps us catch bad guys now by reminding us why the rules matter." Mrs. Morrison knelt and hugged him, tears in her eyes. "Yes, he does. And so do you, by being brave enough to get better." Later that evening, during our nightly chess game, Michael asked me a question that stopped me cold. "Dad, do you think Mr. Barrett has kids?" "He does," I answered carefully. "2 of them." Michael moved his bishop, considering this. "Do they hate him for being bad, or do they miss him?" "Probably both," I said. "Sometimes people we love make terrible choices. Like choosing money over helping people." He captured my rook with a clever combination. "Exactly. That's why we built the Compliance Center, to help people make better choices." "And to remember the other Michael," he added, setting up checkmate. "So his mom and dad know he still helps people." I studied my son's face, seeing wisdom beyond his years. The crisis that Barrett had tried to use against us had instead forged something stronger, not just in Michael's heart, but in the company's soul. The next morning, I received a letter from prison. Barrett had written to apologize, claiming he finally understood the damage he'd caused. I filed the letter away without responding. His redemption wasn't my concern anymore. My focus remained on building something positive from the ashes of his crimes. The Compliance Center was already receiving national recognition, our protocols being adopted as industry standards. Other companies sent their compliance officers to learn from our experience. But my proudest achievement sat across from me every evening, moving chess pieces with steady hands and a stronger heart, understanding that sometimes the greatest victories come from standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. "Checkmate," Michael announced, as he did most evenings now. "Want to know how I won?" "How?" "I remembered what you taught me. Always think 3 moves ahead, and never forget why we're playing." Out of the mouths of babes comes wisdom that even most sophisticated fraud schemes can't corrupt. Barrett had chosen money over morality. We'd chosen integrity over expedience. And in the end, that made all the difference. The other Michael Morrison's memory lived on in every life we saved, every fraud we prevented, every family we helped. And my Michael, growing stronger each day, showed that sometimes the best revenge isn't punishment. It's proving that doing the right thing still matters.